I'm just going to first of all update you just a little bit on what the Chambers of Commerce are doing nationally, and that we're supporting them with, obviously from a regional perspective. One of the things they've done, the British Chambers of Commerce have done, is put up a constructive challenge to the government today to get more of the CBILS lenders, the banks, offering overdrafts as opposed to just loans. Lots of businesses are struggling as it is to get loans that they're going to then struggle to repay following all this coronavirus outbreak. Is going to probably cause more damage than help. So we're lobbying to actually get some overdrafts in place rather than the loans. And one of the big things that we're still pushing for is to get the banks and the Treasury and HMRC processes moving quickly enough so that businesses can access all the help that's being offered. It's still not available very easily. It's not surprising because obviously these are just unprecedented times and it's taking a long time for these processes to get through. But we're pushing, and our colleagues in London are really supporting all the civil servants that are trying to make it happen on the ground. And the other thing really is that those people that are falling between the cracks, there are some gaps in the systems. So for medium firms, for example, we're pushing for some more business rates holidays, and also income protection for small business directors, those that have been encouraged over many years to take dividends as opposed to a large salary themselves. Again, they're struggling, and I've sent up a couple of examples of that to our policy people at BCC over the last couple of days from businesses that have contacted me, so that just strengthens the case. As always, if you are do have any specific issues that we're not covering here or that you want us to lobby for along these lines, please do let either myself or Olivia have those, and we will forward them to the relevant people. I've actually forwarded a couple this morning to our panellists and to Plymouth City Council for support, for some guidance. So we are trying to very much be that facilitator, signposting you all in the right direction so that you can get the answers. So please keep them coming. I think that's probably enough from me. If you've got any questions afterwards, then please feel free to ask me. But the floor is now open really for our guests, Adam and Ian, from Thomas Westcott. They're going to give just a 5-minute overview each of some updates and some information that you really need to know. And then really the floor's open to you to ask your own questions. And I know that Ian and Adam will do their very best to answer those for you. If you want to ask questions privately, please use the chat facility that's at the bottom centre of your screen. You can either ask privately or as a group, and Adam and Ian will answer those either on this session, or if you want it to be private and you want them to respond after this, then they've kindly offered to do so. And if you give us permission to give them your email addresses, then we'll forward those to you. When we come to the question and answer, if anybody wants to raise their hand, please do so using the tools at the bottom. So if you go on to participants at the bottom, and you will see at the bottom there's an opportunity to raise a hand. You can do that, and then Olivia, who's managing this call, will notice that you've raised your hand and come to you for a question. All right, so over to Adam then. Thank you.
Super. Thanks, Helen. I wonder, Ian, can I ask you just to give a bit of an overview first, and then come back to me for CBILS, and I can talk through some of the charity pieces.
Okay, all right. Catch me unaware there. Okay, we've been very busy the last few weeks trying to assist our clients and contacts with details of the various business support schemes available. Certainly the most questions we've had on is the job retention scheme. So I'll quickly go through a few, what's been announced on that one. and then a little bit about the self-employed income support scheme, and then we can pick up anything else in the questions. In terms of the job retention scheme, obviously it was frantically announced by Government Treasury on the 20th of March. They hadn't really thought through the practicalities of the scheme, and what we've had is several updates to the guidance subsequently. The latest update was the 9th of April on that one, and that's brought in stuff like, well, if you've had a change of workforce since end of February under 2p, and you've moved payroll, can you look back? And yes, you can. I'll just go through a few of the basics just to remind those who haven't heard it. Okay, the scheme's open to all UK employers with a PAYE scheme set up and in use as at 28th of February. And obviously, you as an employer can designate certain employees as furloughed workers, keep them on the payroll, but it's fundamental that once they're furloughed, they can't do any work for the business. You can't reduce hours, they can't work in a part-time capacity, they just cannot undertake any work providing services or generating revenue for the business. And the minimum furlough period is 3 weeks, but you can, to give flexibility after 3 weeks furlough, you can bring an employee back into work and then put them back on furlough if you need to at a later date, just to give some flexibility in that. It's been confirmed that directors, owner-managed businesses, personal service company directors can furlough themselves. Whilst they can't, again, provide any services or generate any revenue, they must still continue to undertake their sort of minimum statutory duties under the Companies Act, ensuring accounts get filed, VAT returns submitted. And if you're a company director, one of the requirements for the record keeping, if you like, is that you'll need to prepare a board minute, effectively furloughing yourself and recording that decision from the date that you're being furloughed. In terms of the regular wage that's being used to calculate the 80% furlough wage, or 2,500 maximum or minimum, maximum even, past overtime fees, compulsory bonuses and compulsory commission payments are included in the regular wage. But anything discretionary, any discretionary bonuses, any tips must be excluded. Scheme doesn't apply to dividend payments. So if you're a director taking a small salary, well, unfortunately it's tough. You can claim on 80% of that salary, but only where it's paid through PAYE. Now, last Wednesday, they announced that they hope that the HMRC portal will become live on the 20th of April. And they're hoping to pay businesses by the end of April. So 20th of April, it'll come live. How long it takes them to process and check, we will see. They've tested it and they say it should cope with up to 450,000 claims an hour. Our advice is actually get prepared now. On the latest government guidance note, it gives you all the details you'll need to claim. Employer PAY reference number, number of employees being furloughed, national insurance number for all the employees, names, company UTR, all those details are on the website. They're also on our help sheet on our website. So I won't go through them all, but get the information ready now. If you're dealing with a payroll bureau, if they're authorised for PAY online, they can make the claim for you. But you'll have to check that your payroll bureau service is able to make the claim for you. Otherwise, you're going to have to make the claim and you might have to set up a government gateway account. Might take 10 days, so you don't want that. The other thing we're talking about is the self-employed income support scheme. An update's come out on that one today. It does say that no one can amend prior year tax returns. Well, if you do amend a prior year tax return, any amendments made after 26th of March aren't included. So you can't disclaim capital allowances, increase your profit. In terms of the averaging, it looks as though if you made a loss, that it will be a loss rather than a zero. So in summary, the self-employed income support is you've got to be self-employed on or before 5th of April 2019. You must have traded through 1920, and you must be intending to continue to trade through the current tax year, through to 2021. The revenue will be going through their records. They'll be looking at your last 3-year returns or less. They'll be working out if you meet the under 50,000 profit. They'll be working out your average profits, and they'll be writing to you probably mid-May, and a grant should come out at the end of June, 3 months paid as one. So really the revenue are doing the work for you on that one, but you will have to survive till then on universal credit or by still working, because the difference with self-employed is you can continue to work. Under the job retention scheme, the employee cannot do any work for that employer. I think that's probably 5 minutes, so I'll move across to Adam and then I can pick up on any further detail later. Adam?
Thanks, Ian. So the one thing I wanted to pick up before I talk about charities was just CBILS, the Coronavirus Business Interruption Loan Scheme. Now, Helen alluded to this in her opening remarks, and I've been on some sort of webinars with the CBI and with Treasury on this, and this is rapidly evolving. I think what they've realised is the initial release of CBILS didn't necessarily meet the needs of business. I've also spoken to some banks, and it's really not working for them either, just because this is moving so quickly, and therefore the guidance they're receiving is changing so quickly. I know that banks would very much like to also be able to offer this as an overdraft offering rather than just loans. So what I would say is sort of very much watch this space for changes that I think we're expecting to happen this week. But if anyone is trying to access the scheme and having difficulty, please do let Ian or I know, or let Helen know, because there are different bodies that have got direct links right into the centre to feed back on the experiences of people. And already the changes that have been made, you can see that those have been made on the basis of feedback people have given. So if you're trying to access a business interruption loan and it's proving to be painful, then please do share that feedback so we can get that message right back to the centre for you. I then just wanted to pick up a little bit on charities and non-profits, because I think they were missing from some of the early remarks that came out from the government, and they've in the Chancellor's updates last week, we can see that I think they're trying to catch up. So I think there's sort of two things to consider really on the charities. One's a sort of a funding package response, and another is some more operational matters. Now, I know the operational stuff won't be relevant for all on the call, so let me just sort of take a bit of a canter through, but just things for those in charities or trustees to be aware of. Yeah, at the moment, a lot of charities are thinking, wouldn't it be great if they could do their bit to help, but really need to be mindful that you're still working within your charitable objects. So if the objects are anything around helping groups of people, relief of poverty and care, then you're probably going to be okay. If you've got a narrower remit as a charity, then it would be really unfortunate to fall foul of working beyond your charitable objects because you're well-intentioned and wanting to help at the current time. A lot of people are moving to telephone meetings or Zoom meetings, particularly in respect of AGMs. Just need to make sure that that's actually sort of permissible within your governing documents. I think that the recommendations that are coming out of the Charity Commission at the moment are just, if you're making some unusual decisions for the right reasons, just make sure that your record keeping and your minute taking is even stronger and even clearer than it would normally be. No one's going to come down heavy-handed on actions that are taken for the right reasons in the current climate, as long as they can see the thought process behind those. And then, Helen, there was a really helpful note that came out Charity Sorp earlier about some things for trustees to be thinking about that I've put up on my LinkedIn, but it might be one for the chamber to put round with any notes from this as well, if you or Olivia want to pick that up. And then just talk about funding package for charities. So everything that Ian mentioned around the job retention scheme, that's all relevant for charities as well. But in addition to that, the Chancellor's announced a £750 million funding. Now that's broken down into three different categories. There's 360 million that's coming directly from government departments being prioritised for charities that are working in their frontline response to coronavirus. So working in care, working in poverty, working in food, those charities in that space are likely to be prioritised. Beyond that, though, there's 370 million that's been allocated for the National Lottery Community Fund. Now, the National Lottery, if you look on their website, they're still waiting for guidance on how they're getting the money and how they can share the money. But what is up and running is the 20 million that the government has already passed over to the National Emergencies Trust, and which is their match funding element from the BBC fundraising night that's due to happen shortly. That 20 million has been allocated to community foundations, and Devon Community Foundation's sort of proportion of that has already been released and is already available for you to apply to through the Devon Community Foundation website. Now, what's really encouraging is it's a really straightforward pot for you to access. If you have received funds from the Community Foundation in, I think it's the last 3 years, all you need to do is ask for the money. You don't need to do anything else. If you haven't received funds before, then the application process is still fairly straightforward. You know, it's details of your charity, details of where you like the money to be paid to, and confirmation that you meet some really straightforward eligibility criteria. You know, are you a registered body? Do you have more than 2 independent people on the board? But this is not an onerous process to go through. What they're looking to support is running costs, not loss of income. So that this is not a fund to meet loss of income. This is a fund to help charities and non-profits meet their running costs for the coming months so they can continue to do the good work they're doing. That's on the Devon Community Foundation website. But happy to take any questions, as Ian is, on anything related to charities or anything related to the wider benefit package available.
Lovely, thank you so much, Adam and Ian. We covered an awful lot there in just a few minutes. So, questions. Has anybody got any specific questions they would like to ask? I'm going to start off with one that's been put through on the chat facility, which is about compulsory bonuses under the job retention scheme. Ian, I think it's for you. Wondering if you can give an example of a compulsory bonus?
Well, I don't know about a compulsory bonus, but I know that Arla, etc., where a lot of estate agents, for example, are, you know, relatively low paid base salary, and then they've got a commission based agreed top up based on, you know, house sales, and, you know, that's a contractual compulsory commission that you know, is already part of their base regular salary, so that is included, as opposed to discretionary. A compulsory bonus, I mean, is probably where it's contractually entitled to 10% bonus annually, or otherwise, as opposed to something that they've got no entitlement to, and is something entirely at the discretion of the employer. Again, all we've had is these phrases in the guidance, such as passed over time, compulsory bonus. Really, we're just working on opinions at the moment as to what we can and can't include, and we've just got to take a view. And if there's a contractual entitlement, then I would suggest that it's compulsory.
Thanks for that, Ian. Sue Brazell, you've raised your hand.
Oh, just muted.
There you go.
Can you hear me?
Mm.
Hi, Adam. A quick question for you. So, I'm the service manager for a restorative justice service delivered in partnership with Shekinah. And we have been included in a bid to the Home Office. This is kind of literally just before the COVID-19 struck, which we're due to hear about as part of a wider bid in the next couple of weeks. We know that the bid, we're 99% sure that the bid is going to be successful. It's been led by Plymouth City Council and others. But the money probably isn't going to be released until about July, August time. Similarly, we have we've been built into a tender for which the monies have been received but aren't going to be released until about September time. Again, a delay from currently. In order for us to kind of keep a steady ship almost within the team, or would we be eligible for any, an application through kind of some of the charity funding that you've mentioned, in addition or as part of a wider Shekinah kind of bid?
So what I'm hearing is that you're likely to have costs met, but you're going to have some short-term cash flow problems.
Yeah.
I don't see why you couldn't apply to something like the Community Foundation that's available, but I wonder if there are some other options which could be to contact at the council if they're a sort of a partner in some of those bids, or whether there's an option more on the sort of civils front. Appreciate that sort of charities are excluded from civils unless you make more than 50% of your income from trading activity, which might actually make it easier for Shekinah, because you don't have to fit yourself as a sort of, you don't have to try and fit a sort of round peg into a square hole, but whether actually there's some short-term support that sort of your banking relationships might be able to provide once you get the confirmation that you've got that funding coming through in September.
Yeah, I mean, I guess kind of for us, for this particular service, we know there's been an increase in crime, we know particularly around domestic abuse. My fear is that by us waiting on the delay of funding coming in, kind of we're not able to meet the needs of the service. So it's not directly around kind of poverty per se, but this is more around kind of increased levels of crime for this particular service.
I could certainly see how you could argue that the service that you're providing in that specific project, that's directly frontline. And it's the reason it's directly frontline is because, crime goes up, mental health difficulties increase, domestic abuse increases, and it's all in relation to, its relation to unemployment and its relation to financial hardship. And I could then see how you could tie that project into being sort of directly frontline in the response to coronavirus. But happy to pick up offline, and I'm in fairly frequent conversations with Steve Withers, so I'm happy to pick up.
Oh, are you? Okay. Brilliant.
Steve as well, if that's helpful.
Yeah. Thank you, Adam. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. Thanks, Adam. Julie Spencer. Julie, you've got your hand up too.
Okay. It's one for Ian. It's about the job retention scheme. When they talk about statutory minimum amount of work that somebody like myself, an ops manager, would be able to do, because the board are looking to furlough me as the rest of the staff with the charity, am I able to do payroll? And also, we've applied for grants. Can I check my emails to see if we've been successful? Because I know this sounds silly, and that is
sorry,
sort of like...
Go back a step. As an ops manager, are you an officer or a director of the company?
I'm not a director, no.
No, nor are you, you're probably an employee rather than an officer. So the guidance specifically comes down to the statutory duties of officers of the company and directors. So they're under the Companies Act. They have certain duties to maintain records, etc. So that is specific to directors. Now, if you are just an ops manager, you're an employee, you cannot provide services to that running the payroll would be you providing services to your employer, so you couldn't be furloughed. They could, they could outsource it to a payroll bureau, but you, as an employee, you couldn't run the payroll. No.
Right. Okay.
That's work, and at the moment it's black and white. You're either no work or work, and there's no job retention for reduced hours or anything like that.
Okay. So if the board took on the payroll, they would be able to furlough me.
Yes.
Right. And would they be able...
You couldn't be on furlough and run the payroll, no.
Okay. No, that's fine. I just needed to check that, because we hear lots of differing things about what you can and what you can't do, and this has been it's clear, but it's sort of grey as well.
It is. I mean, a lot of people think, common sense should apply, and we ought to be able to reduce hours and their claim on our reduced claim job retention scheme on our reduced hours. Well, no, it's absolutely no work can be undertaken. And what is very subjective is that just reading, can you read emails? Can you reply to emails? And I think the answer has to be no. Right. You just should know you're off work. You're on effectively what would normally be unpaid leave, but you're on a temporary leave of absence, no work available.
Okay. All right. That's great. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for that one, Julie. Russ Cole, you've got your hand up too, if you'd like to ask a question.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you. So my question is around the small business grants, the 10K grants. So we've actually just recently relocated to Plymouth Science Park, and I was very impressed with the City Council turning around our grant within a few days for the entity that pays the rent and has applied for the small business rate relief. However, it's a group of entities that's relocated. So my understanding is the other entities whose principal place of business has moved, we pay corporation tax, etc. We're unable to get those grants for those entities. Is that correct? Are there other, if so, are there other ways of getting those?
I don't know your specific circumstances, but the business rates is per hereditament or per unit they talk about. So if you have more than one business retail unit or business unit, the grant should be per unit. The issue we have obviously is it's as per the ratings list at 11th of March. And although they do say if that's not up to date, then they will not necessarily issue the payment to the person on the record. They'll ensure that they would like to think that the appropriate ratepayer receives the grant. But there are people in transition who've applied for business rates but haven't been valued yet, and they're not able to get the grant. There are lots of issues at the moment, mostly ones to take up with the council, I would suggest, but it should be per unit, not per business.
Yeah, we have a large unit to house the group, so we have multiple entities that are sharing a large unit, so we're only getting one.
Yeah, no, unfortunately it is clear black and white, it's per unit. Whether it is appropriate that it should have been registered as one unit or registered as subsets is I suppose the question.
Okay, thank you.
Does that help, Russ?
Well, no, because I'm not going to
get the answer he wants.
It helps to clarify.
The answer I wanted, but it's confirmed my understanding. So.
You know where you stand. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, got Joe Grew would like to ask something.
Yeah. Good afternoon. Hello. We are in a similar situation than Russ. We are renting a business unit, but my landlord is the one who pays the business rates. Although the unit where workshop is in, has no business rates, but we, let's put it this way, it is a 260 square meter unit, and it's split into 3 smaller units. And because of the landlord being registered with the council, he applied for the £10,000, but we as tenants actually got nothing. And I spoke to the council about it, and they said, as it stands, only the person who has applied for the business rate relief will get the £10,000. So us as sub-tenants actually got nothing. And the council's response was that we need to speak to the landlord of course, he's very happy to keep the 10,000 and ask us for the rent. So that's how far we got with our inquiries.
Yeah, well, I mean, it will come down to who is the person that should be registered for business rates at that premises. If it is the landlord and he's effectively incorporating that into rent, then he's getting the grant. Whether under the legislation, I'm not a business grant expert. I'm a tax. Normally, I'm direct taxes, not business rates. You know, it's fundamentally who had the requirement to register for business rates. If it's you, then the name of your business should have been on the business rates list at 11th of March. And if the wrong name's on it, you can try and correct that and receive the grant. Otherwise, you would hope that your landlord would reimburse some of the grant to you as some recompense for the rent you're paying. But that's there's no contractual obligation for that, obviously.
Yes, okay. Another question regarding the grant, might be a bit of a silly question, but if you get this grant, do you have to pay tax on it? Do you have to take care of this income?
It's taxable. It's taxable income. All these grants are taxable. The job retention scheme, well, is taxable in the hands of the employer. The self-employment income support grant is taxable, as is the business rates grant. It's just the other side of you get tax relief on the rates you pay, where you pay them, and you're taxed obviously on receipt on the other side.
Excellent, thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Joe. I'm sure that helped quite a few people. I know various businesses are in the same situation, so I'm sure it helped. I've also had a question here from somebody who says, we've got an office in Southampton for which we pay rent, which includes rates within. Could we apply for anything to help? Which I think is very similar to what Joe was asking. Staff are all now working from home, but we still have the office still furnished. Are you able to help with that one, Adam?
Being that it sounds like a business grant one, without wanting to deflect it, maybe I'll pass that over to Ian.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it's the same position. Who is the person required to register for business rates for that unit? Is it the landlord? Is it the tenant? And you know, whoever is properly should be the ratepayer as of 11th of March is the person entitled to the grant. In terms of furniture, there is an empty unit rates relief, but obviously you're not going to get it if you've got furniture, etc. in it. But the question is who's got the rates responsibility as of 11th of March, and if the position is wrong currently and the subtenant has the obligation to register and has failed to do so, well, it may be in your interest to correct it, but obviously it may be discretionary as whether the council actually action anything.
And that's a question that's coming out quite a bit, Helen. Is some of the nuances around this sort of business rates grant? Is who's the right party to have registered for that? Should it be the landlord or should it be the tenant? And it could be the person who's registered is not the person that is most needing of that grant now. Mm-hmm. But you know, it's about who was registered and what was the position as at the cut-off date that's been set.
So there's not very much we can actually do now. It really depends on historical information.
Yeah, I mean, the guidance specifically says no changes made to the business rateable value or rating assessment after 11th of March will be accepted for the purposes of determining eligibility. In cases where there are clear errors on the rating list on 11th of March, local authorities may, at their discretion, withhold the grant and or award the grant based on their view of which businesses would have been entitled. So it's discretion, but again, if the ratings list is not up to date as it should be, they have flexibility to correct the position to give the grant to the appropriate business.
Thank you. Thanks. That's a lot clearer as far as I'm concerned anyway. Thank you. Got another question as well. So if you've been self-employed for several years, I've got a business that's self-employed, disappeared from the screen again, several years, but very rarely gets above the taxable income.
Yeah.
Are they still eligible for the self-employed grants? And if so, how do they apply for it?
Right. Well, I mean, as long as you are self-employed and have registered for self-assessment, because obviously if you have very small profits, you might not have had a requirement to register because you aren't actually paying tax. But if you are submitting a self-assessment tax return, it's not based on whether you pay tax or not. It's just based whether you've made a profit or not. So even if you've made small profits, it will be based on 80% of your average profits for the 3 years, 16, 17, 17, 18, 18, 19, and you'll receive as a single lump sum in June a payment for each month of March, April and May based on that average monthly profit.
Thank you. And sorry, and how do they apply for it? How do you get
the HMRC, we were writing, HMRC are as we speak probably, if they haven't already developed the software, they're doing it to search their database. They will review all submitted tax returns for self-employed and partners in partnership businesses. They will review the profit position. They'll review the eligibility to ensure that the profits aren't over 50,000, and they will write to you and they say, we think you're entitled to a grant, please claim. They will work out the amount that's due to you and they will then pay it in early June. So you will be, in the same way that businesses are contacted with regard to the grants, HMRC will be contacting all self-employed and partners and partnership businesses asking or suggesting that they're eligible and may wish to claim.
Lovely, thank you very much. Tony Cobley, you have your hand up now. Over to you. You're muted, Tony.
I'm on. I've got a question for Ian, actually.
Okay.
The self-employment grants, are they dependent upon when your work dried up, when it begins again, and are they affected by any cash flow that's happening in between?
The answer is, in theory, you're claiming it because your business has been affected by coronavirus, and I think there's unlikely to be any business out there that's not been in some way affected. It will be simply a question of, as I say, you can continue to work. You should have, it's based on the position up to 5th of April 2019, but as long as you've continued to remain self-employed through 2019-20, so the tax year just ended 5th of April, and intend to continue to remain self-employed through the current tax year, subject to how long this goes, and if a business can continue, then you're entitled to the grant. And at the moment, the revenue will just be working on the numbers that the self-employed profits are more than 50% of the taxable income, that the profits are under 50,000. They will write to you a little bit in the same way as when the job retention scheme grant is claimed, you will make declarations. Those declarations, I am sure, will be there. You'll go onto an online portal, you'll say, yes, I continued self-employed in 2019-20. Yes, I am continuing and intend to continue for the year. Yes, I've been affected by coronavirus. And then they will repay the grant to you.
That's great, thank you.
All right, Tony.
Yep, lovely.
Thank you. Donna Barnes, over to you. You need to unmute yourself.
Afternoon, everybody. Another one for you, I'm afraid, again.
Okay.
Unfortunately, so the answer won't be change the accountant. Unfortunately, I checked my self-assessment return to find there was an error on the input. The accounts person that I used to do it only put in the dividend as opposed to any other income. I checked this after the date, and now they've changed the date. My thought was that I've got until the 23rd of April to amend it to make it correct, but they've obviously now changed that today. Would you make any suggestions? Because it's an obvious error, because it's an obvious error.
Well, it's slightly different things. The 23rd of April, whereas somebody hadn't already submitted their 2018-19 tax return, so they were already late, but they hadn't yet submitted it. They were allowed to submit their late return for 18-19 tax year by the 23rd of April and still count for the scheme. Subsequently, obviously, lots of, as is often the case, professionals have decided, right, how can we take advantage of this system? Oh, let's amend tax returns, let's disclaim various bits of expenditure, let's increase our profits and maximise the 80% recovery. So they have quite rightly said, well, we're not allowing you to amend a prior year return after 26th of March, and it can't. You're still, you know, if it's wrong, you're still obliged to correct it. It's just for the purposes of their number crunching, I'm assuming it won't be included, even if actually this amendment might otherwise reduce eligibility for the claim. Because if you're saying other income, I'm assuming you're not saying self-employed income, you're saying...
Yeah, it was self-employed income. Predominantly, most of my income is self-employed.
Oh yeah, sorry. Okay, well, unfortunately, I think it's just black and white. You won't, I mean, obviously make the amendment, but it's based on the black and white guidance, they won't take it into account.
Okay, right, thank you.
Okay, Donna, lovely, thank you. Right, we're getting to the close. Any more questions? Anybody else got to ask? I've got one here about contacting you offline regarding some universal credit applications. What I will say about that is that our ChamberLive next week, we do have some specialist universal credit. I'm hoping to have citizens' advice on as well. So that's something we're covering in more detail next week. However, if it's urgent, is it possible to contact one of you privately about that? Are you able to help?
We'll help in any way we can.
Yeah, happy to, Helen.
Even if we don't know the answer ourselves, the advantage is we usually know someone that can.
Brilliant. Okay, we'll just come back, save that until next week, but thank you for that. Right, is there any more questions? I'd just like to ask Adam, something we touched on earlier, Adam, before everybody joined us, just to clarify the eligibility of charities again, because as I say, some national charity does, that I'm sort of fairly closely linked with myself, does actually feel that, think that they're not included.
So there has been potentially some sort of mixed or confusing messages coming out around charities. The funding packages available, sort of one of those, the 360 million that's being allocated directly from government departments to end charities, that is specifically to prioritise charities that are involved in the frontline response to coronavirus. So those are charities that are involved in care. Those are charities that are involved in supporting with poverty relief, or any charities that are related to food or food distribution. There are separate pots of money to support charity and sort of non-profits more broadly, in much the same way as the job retention scheme or CBILS is there to support business more broadly. The government is not issuing pots of money to only support charities that are involved in the response to coronavirus.
Thank you. That's brilliant. Thanks for that. Right. Well, has anybody got any more urgent questions that they'd like to ask now? As I say, if anybody would like to email either myself or Olivia following this with anything private that you'd like us to forward on to Ian or Adam, I know they're very kindly offered to support us. So please feel free to do that. And please also keep coming your own personal examples of either difficulties, but the other thing as well is some really good, innovative things that are happening within our organisations, within our membership. It's really good to hear how that's supporting. We're going to be putting a plea out on behalf of a couple of organisations that are looking for businesses to support in ways that they might be able to. So please look at that on our newsletter that will come out on Thursday. And if there's any way that you feel that the membership can help you by providing more relief or more services and so on, then please do let us know. Again, we can get that out to the membership. We're having a really good response through our membership for all our appeals, and I'd like to thank you very much for that. That will be really, really helpful. Anything else you'd like to say, Ian and Adam, in closing?
All I just say is I can see that Olivia has really helpfully put email addresses for you and I, Helen, in the chat panel.
Great, thanks, Olivia.
So yeah, really happy to answer any follow-up questions if anyone wants to send anything my way.
Brilliant. Jason, did you want something? Jason van der Schou, did you want something? Just to say hi.
No, just saying hi, and this is
Oh.
very
Hello, that's fine then, thanks. Well, thank you everybody once again. We look forward to seeing you next week when, as I say, we're looking a little bit more about the personal incomes, anybody that's falling through those gaps that are not immediately covered by the government schemes so far. We've got some more experts from various angles to answer your specific questions. And again, if they're private, we're happy to deal with them privately rather than in front of everybody. So I'd just like to wish you a good week and keep well, keep safe, and keep in touch. Keep us up to date with all your news. It's good to hear from you and see you.
Thank you.